Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. On this post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Today I have Edwin with me once more. Hi Edwin, how are you going?
Martin, rain, hail or shine, we shall persevere, and we shall do these Monday night rants because, as we found out, we have got a global audience and global leaders are watching our shows and they're taking our advice. Simple as that. We've got the receipts, Martin. We have got the receipts.
Exactly. Here we are. Boris is now talking about 50-year mortgages. And guess what? We spoke about 50-year mortgages just 3 weeks ago. What do you make of that then, Edwin?
Well, look, we're out there. We're out there. I think we go past Sleepy Joe's bedtime, so I don't think he watches us. But I think Trump may be there in the wings watching. You never know. You just never know. So look, I'm really hoping that Putin watches our rants sometime soon, and then things start changing globally. I don't know, Martin, but all I know is that we're a global phenomenon, and the leaders of the Western world are watching us. Not to be disrespectful for the local leaders, because we are followed by local parliamentarians as well.
Yeah, but it is interesting because I did a show on 50-year mortgages, right? Which was actually quite interesting because I calculated the net reduction in monthly repayments relative to the amount of interest that you have to pay to the bank over the life of the mortgage, right? And basically you had a small reduction in the monthly repayments as the length extended, but the banks nearly doubled the amount of interest that they got over the life of the loan. So this is clearly a strategy that's more designed to support the banks than actually help people to get into the market more affordably. It's nonsense, really.
Look, it's not. And the only thing that they haven't spoken about in the black and white section of it, in the fine print, is how far you can will it down to up to what generation. I'd say, look, just it's a death pledge. It's a lifelong journey. Let's just call it a generational pledge. They shouldn't call it a mortgage anymore. They just call it a generational pledge. So you can will it down to your offspring, and then your grandchildren, and your great grandchildren. Sky's the limit.
Yeah, well, the point there, of course, is that once there's a mortgage on the property, it's not yours. You're basically there as a tenant in right, is the official language, right? You don't own it until you've paid off the mortgage. So probably you'll never actually own it outright. You'll always be owing something and then pass it down, right? Or as somebody said once, you'll own nothing and be free, and be happy.
And be happy. The only thing is look, I could pallet the willing land down, as you answered on that tweet, on that thread there that put out. The value's in the land. But my question is, mate, what about all those poor bastards that bought into the Opal Towers, the Mascot Towers, the Dildum Towers, the Top Place Towers, all these towers that are going to fade away? And the second question is, will these properties last the 50 years? That's
Don't they have a 7-year guarantee or something? Well, if you're lucky, right?
Not if it's above 4 stories.
No, that's true. Well, that's clearly why we know why that happens, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. And in some cases, they even count the basement car park as the first level. So damned if you do, damned if you don't. So look, at the end of the day, we'll still go back to land. The value's in the land. And we just haven't, for the last 30 years, we just haven't been able to build anything as sustainable and as solid as in the past. I mean, it all goes to show. I mean, we haven't. When was the last time we sent somebody to land on the moon, for crying out loud? Wasn't it in the late 50s, early 60s that we landed on the moon, and we still haven't sent anybody else yet? We've sent a car up in space. I know that much.
Well, that's true, and we won't debate whether they landed on the moon or not, but I remember it actually, but it might have been a very, very fancy television production.
Well, look, that's what we're going to be talking about today: conspiracy theories and and the wacky world of wacky world of real estate. But it's all happening. I'm one to believe that even this rain is a big, is not a natural phenomenon. It's got to be man-made. Look, this is where it's either man made as such, in such it's created by cloud seeding, and the people in Camden can, are going to be very upset, or, so they can blame further, higher authorities, or they're going to start blaming the local authorities. These poor bastards in Camden. I mean, it's, the planning down there hasn't been the most brilliant, and you've got to wonder how many councillors and LGA officials got brown paper bags over the years and bought properties elsewhere other than Camden.
Yeah, that's right. Well, building on floodplains, what could possibly go wrong? Well, now we know what could possibly go wrong. And the trouble is, of course, that it may well happen again and again and again. And yet they are still allowing more construction, more building on those same low-level plots just further away. It is another disaster waiting to happen, isn't it?
Look, it is. And this is you only have to look at look at Google Maps to get an understanding of the landscape. And as we said in the previous podcast, the previous show, we said some of the historical names of the suburbs will give you a very strong clue as to what was happening in the area, previously. So it's just it's a crazy world. And then look at you don't have to. I mean, you just Google the suburb, the location that you want to be buying into, or the subdivisions, predominantly the latest subdivisions that have sprung up over the last 20 years, and you'll be able to see what the historical landscape was and how much of it was backfilled, and how much works were done in there in order to try and get it above the water levels, but unsuccessfully. And it's been proven over the last 10 years that a lot of these backfilled areas just haven't been successful. We've also spoken about in the show how the shortcuts that developers and builders take when developing the land, because of the astronomical costs that they front, by the local costs, local government costs, stamp duties, taxes, and everything else. So, the conclusion is you take corners. You take corners on the civil works, which could be anywhere between $150,000 to $200,000 per lot, and then you take shortcuts in the construction. You start using cheaper, nastier materials that are being imported and create problems further down the track past the warranties, the specific warranties that they give. So all this is now really as they say, the chickens are coming home to roost, and it's all going to be it's all backfiring on the state governments, the lack of planning, local LGA planning, and it's only going to get worse, as you and I have been saying for a couple of years now. 2022 is really where it's going to be. It's going to be a trial by fire, and in this case, a trial by rain and water. And it's only going to get worse before it can get better.
Yeah, and isn't it true that Camden was actually Camden on the Marsh originally? No, I'm making that up, but well, it is crazy. Now let's talk about crazy. What about the wee chatters, right? Because it's crazy over there as well.
Oh, look, it is. It's it's the 25th anniversary of the Hong Kong handover, and G was actually visiting Hong Kong. A couple of Hongkongese, artists, renowned figures, writers and artists have passed away as well. So it's pretty much the passing of an era. And on top of that, we've got our own Albo now is upsetting the CCP, upsetting the Chinese government. But, we had a love affair going on a week ago, Martin, and now he's going to put his foot in and spruiking, pledging all sorts of money to Ukraine and everywhere else where we shouldn't be. And he's gone AWOL with the local, the local disasters that we're facing, the New South Wales people are facing, and yet he's overseas still on a honeymoon. But at the same time, starts upsetting China. We had a great, starting to develop into a great love affair, and I was looking forward to all the Chinese tourists, students, and property buyers personally.
Yeah, well, maybe we won't get them. Of course, the last restrictions got taken away, literally in the last 24 hours or so. So effectively, anybody can come and visit now. You won't be tested on the way in, which is maybe good, maybe not. But no, it is interesting, the whole China axis, and it's fascinating to see how this is going to play out, because the economy over there is still pretty weak, and they're throwing more money at the property sector and other sectors to try and actually prop it up. But I think I may have mentioned if you look at the starts of new floor square builds, it's much lower than it's been for the last 4 or 5 years. So they're way down. So, the momentum in terms of the property sector in China is very weak now. So, the whole economic question over China is, I think, a quite significant one.
Look, it is. And unemployment is going through the roof. The last generation movement gains momentum, by the day. And pretty much giving the middle finger to the central government and just saying stuff it. So they're in a lot of strife, and from a socioeconomic front there, what they're facing now is a lot of unrest, civil unrest with the people. The crime and violence is really on the uptick, and to the point where people are just that are being laid off from the work. They're taking matters into their own hands, and unfortunately, they're walking into major office buildings in Shanghai and just basically slashing anybody that stands in their way. And the people are very, very angry. But then again, you see, it's not just a phenomenon that's occurring in mainland China, but I can see that it's something that's occurring globally, and it's going to only get worse in the Western world. And look, we're not far from it ourselves. As we front our economic woes that are just around the corner, with regards to inflation, recession. I think 7 or 8 podcasts ago, I made a mention that we could be walking into. Back then, I was talking about a global recession, if not a depression. So it's. But then again, as I said, the powers that be can't really fix where we're at right now, in my opinion. This is my personal opinion, unless it fully breaks, in order to then introduce our other conspiracy theories of digital currency and the like. But are they really conspiracy theories, and are they greater controls that they're going to be placed on the people, and what we buy, what we can buy, where we buy, where we live, where we rent, and so forth?
Yeah, well, I did a show on digital currencies the other day, in central bank digital currencies, and I went back and looked at what the UN had said, what the BIS just said about it, what the Federal Reserve Review in the US said about digital currencies, etc., etc. And you can string it together, and you can actually see how they're looking at this as a way of exerting greater control of monetary policy, on linking central bank digital currencies more globally, which sort of gets more and more like the feeling of, well, hang on a moment, is this a new currency? Is this a new financial system they're talking about? In other words, they've broken the current one. Are they trying to replace it with something, quote, new and better? But of course, determined top down by central bankers and by, the technocrats from these unelected organizations globally. It's not a good look.
Look, no, it's not. And it's just going to, again, Is it a conspiracy? Are we really, we're really living in the what is it, in the matrix, and the programmers are just playing around with us.
Well, as I think, to quote Douglas Adams, reality is on the blink again, right? I think it's probably about as far as it goes. And talking about reality, there's some reality locally with the the local WeChat chat. So if you want to go cash, well, do you get a better deal or not? That's the question.
Well, look, you do get a better deal, but I guess what I wanted to raise today is interesting how as things get tighter and as labour gets gets more scarce in the building industry, and to get get renovations done. Thank God I got we did all the a lot of the trenching around the houses and the studios and the sheds and everything, because otherwise we would have been in a lot of strife again with all this torrential rainfall. But look, it's really difficult to get local labour. It's really difficult to get tradies. I see a lot of that coming up in chats on Twitter and other social media platforms. A lot of people are having great difficulty, and in the space of the local Sydney market, I've been observing a lot more closely as to how a lot of the local chatterers work with with their trades and so forth. And it's rather interesting, Martin. And the figures, I'm sure we could. A lot of people would want to make the transition and become labourers for some of the WeChat groups for the tradespeople. I mean, they're earning a packet, and this is. And again, this is one of the reasons why yourself, John and Robbie have been talking about the move for a cashless society. But when you start looking at the amount, the numbers in that get transacted on an annual basis, let's say, for example, one labourer, and I'll give you this example of a gyprocking crew of 6. 4 of which are on cash on hand payments on a daily basis. They get $400 a day. You were able to get them at $325 not too long ago, but now they're on $400 to $450 a day, cash in hand, and they can even demand a bit more, and you'd pay for it in order to get the work done. So when you extrapolate that, that's $2,800 a week, because some of these crews work 7 days a week. That's $145,000 a year. Multiply that by 4 in a small team. That's a hell of a lot of money, Martin. That's close to what 500. That's just over $500,000.
I'm in the wrong job, clearly. Except I can't do gyprocking, but that's not a whole other story. Yeah, it does make it really quite stunning. And I've heard many other stories too of people having to pay over the odds, either cash in hand or not, but effectively much higher. Locally down here in the Illawarra, some of the brickies are now 3 times what they were before COVID, 3 times higher.
Yeah, and this is the thing. In order for you to get the work done, you've got a choice. You can wait, or you get done and you pay the cash. Look, in terms of cash or invoice, you can look. Across the board, I would say that you can get very good discounts. A lot of people aren't discounting as much; they're just discounting the GST component from what I hear and what I see. But you can get some really good discounts if you know the people that are going to be doing the work. Look, I guess when you start looking at these sort of numbers and these sort of figures, is it any wonder why a lot of the governments, even our government, is had a big push towards that cashless society, because there is a lot of cash. I mean, then you've got your retail outlets. You've also got a lot of other your hospitality industry and so forth that bring in a lot of cash. I mean, when I go shopping in certain parts of Sydney, Sydney's west and southwest regions for specific types of meats or food or groceries. In some of the butchers and in some of the grocery stores, they'll actually won't accept payment by card. They'll say cash only. And if you don't have the cash, you have to. If you want the goods, you have to walk out and you have to go to an ATM and get the cash.
Well, yeah, my perspective is quite simple, right? I think we should have the right to use cash, and that should never be revoked. But of course, there is also an obligation on businesses who are actually transacting cash to do the right thing in terms of actually declaring the income, etc. And that's the tricky part. But I think the idea of just taking cash out of the system completely and saying thou shalt use a bank account and you'll use digital currency, or you won't transact at all, is not the right solution. Not least because, of course, if the technology goes down, for example, under flood conditions, suddenly there's no power and therefore you can't buy and sell things. Well, that doesn't work very well. And the other is, I think there should be a complete understanding here that there is a civil liberty here to use cash, which I think we should resist any chance of giving that up for some greater good in terms of fraud or money laundering or anything else. Right? It's an excuse, I think. But that said, there will be people on the other side of the argument, but I'm afraid that I'm still a great believer that we should have the freedom to use cash if we want to.
Oh, look, yes, I guess from my point of view is that there are a lot of people that, and a lot of tradespeople, and even not necessarily trades, but labourers that have got a lot of cash piled up. The unfortunate thing is they've got to, if they're going to buy a property or look at buying into the property market, getting into the property arena, or they may already have a property, and they can also get a lot of work done in cash themselves. So it does, I guess it does affect certain regions. This is why we see a lot of areas that are affected dramatically by the economic downturns, and some areas that aren't. And they chug along because of the demographics and the nature of people, which we'll also discuss a little bit more later on in the show as well. Based on some of the mainstream media reports, with regards to mortgage stress and so forth. So it's, the demographics and, who you follow for us is very key in terms of, what the ethnicity of the people that are in the different, when I say who you follow, who's buying into certain suburbs and certain regions, obviously is going to have an effect on on property price growth and property price drops. And look, I've been watching the markets for almost 30 years now, and that is one of our key indicators, has been over the last 3 decades as to relatively what property will do when there are in the ups and the downs. So it's something that we always adopt and implement when we're looking for properties for clients or for ourselves.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's a very important subject. Now let's go on to the numbers, another important subject, right? And it's a bit of the same old, isn't it?
Look, it is. We haven't dropped that much. I was expecting actually a greater drop in the numbers, in the for sale listing numbers in the Sydney region, given the climate that we're in, literally. But look, I would expect that we would see a greater drop in listing numbers, because obviously the areas won't be accessible, and there'll be a lot of areas of Sydney that the homes will literally get pulled off market, not only because of accessibility, but also because they would have been affected one way or another and damaged by the storms and the continual storms till the end of the week. So, but it will be interesting to see, or what was interesting to see, that although we dropped a little bit further below the 18,784 that I've screenshotted, that they are starting to come back up again. Tomorrow is going to be perhaps there's going to be another deluge, another storm, another black cloud over mortgage holders, and then it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward from tomorrow as to the listing numbers. I'm still of the opinion, I'm on a 50-50 that Switzer may have reached out to a lot more people than what you and I know, and they may pull the properties off the market until spring, and hoping to come back in spring in under much better situations. Because as I've said over and over again, unless you really want to sell, unless you have to sell, and unless you must sell, you're not going to be on the market. You're definitely not going to be testing the market, not in these conditions.
No, well, it's interesting because on Saturday there were a couple of auctions scheduled in the local area around here, and they cancelled them both, right, on the excuse that the weather was bad, which I thought was quite interesting, right? I mean, I've heard of quite good situations where, in fact, determined buyers still come out and snatch a bargain when the weather's a bit bad. But I think it was a rather interesting alibi.
Oh, look, it's a farce. They didn't have anybody, and any real estate agent that takes a property to market, closer than a week onto the auction day, and they don't have genuine prospects. They're they're not doing the vendor justice. And if they're just going to test it, or it works against them. It works against the agent to with all these shenanigans. And this is where you really look. When we were on the other side of the fence, when we were looking, we were selling and helping people to sell. Obviously, not a fan of auctions. Never have been a fan of auctions unless there's specific reasons why you have to sell. So apart from outside of that, I know why many agents do take properties to auction, but look, and then they come up with all sorts of excuses, and then the vendor's under a lot of pressure. So it's unnecessary, it's unwarranted, and it all just comes back and slaps them in the face at the end of the day. But look, the auction numbers are still relatively buoyant, in comparison to what's happening. But tomorrow, post tomorrow, this week, and the following week is going to be really, really interesting, because a lot of listings are lagging on market, and these are listings that come under those three categories that they have to sell. They must sell, or they really want to sell. They've committed elsewhere, or they just want to move on and just realize a loss or a gain, cash out and move on. So we'll see what happens. But again, even with although there's 624 listed for auction for this weekend, my auction region is different to the ones that Louis Christopher talks about, and a little bit more, it's more closer to the domain regions. But I would dare say that out of the 624 that are listed to go to auction this weekend, this Saturday, coming Saturday 9th, I wouldn't be surprised if we only got 50% of those actually being auctioned on the day.
And Edwin, the other interesting observation is that the story about clearance rates, right? They're pretty low again. Of course, you can blame the weather, but in all the newspapers over the Sunday, Monday, they're all saying clearance rates well down, and this is a signature sign of weaker markets ahead.
Yeah, and one of the things that isn't really talked about a lot is how many properties get go off market before the auction. So they pull them from the auction. They don't even they don't have the auction as what you experienced, Mark, because there is no interest. The auctions are cancelled days before or on the day. Ourselves, myself, there was 3 out of 4 were cancelled on Saturday, and I knew of one that I was going to take clients through, and I was making sure on the day before, on Friday evening, with the agent, because I knew that the 2 of the children in the household were sick. One was sick in bed with the flu, and the other one was potentially a close contact with with somebody that had the Crohn. So all these issues are going to be playing out. So this is for me the more the next phase, or the next thing that's interesting with the low clearance rates. Not that I make a big deal out of clearance rates anyway, but for me it's more interesting to see the percentage numbers that get withdrawn from auction.
Yeah, that's the one that is not very well reported. It was very, very important.
And it's more telling. It's more telling. In my view, it's more telling.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note that some of the portals are reporting less information about the auctions than they used to. I wonder why that is. Now, let's go on to talk about the new latest and greatest designs for accommodation, right? So this is a whole new world, isn't it, Edwin?
Well, it is. Look, it's what's wackier than a conspiracy, mate? What's wackier than a conspiracy? They say it's listings, rental listings in Adelaide and in Melbourne.
Indeed. Now, the space shuttle pods, right? This is something from The Guardian talking about the single bed for rent inner city rentals. This is the latest and greatest.
Yeah, look, I've been talking with a number of property agents that still have rent rolls, particularly property managers, about this, and we came up with a number of reasons, and one of the main reasons is that people, other than it benefits people that transient, very, very transient. They're, your, let's say, your backpackers per se, or your visitors to the city from the country that come in for special purposes. But also, the greatest consensus was, if you're going to be staying there for longer term, it's going to be attracting a lot of people that have got a very bad rental history. Because from the way that we looked at it, for not that much more, I'm sure you could share an apartment, whether it be an older style apartment a little bit further out from the city regions, than what you would be paying in these. But look, for me, and for the rest of the property managers that I was talking to, that was the biggest consensus. So it's going to look, it caters for a group of people. They've been obviously approved by the by the local government, and in the fair trade in Victoria. So good luck. But I'm very much a claustrophobic person, so I definitely would not be parking myself behind these.
No. But it reminds me of a Seinfeld, right?
Exactly. This is the thing. This is when Kramer had his 3 Japanese guests. I mean, we're heading closer to Japan. We're walking closer to Japan in more ways than what we can think. I mean, we're going to walk into stagflation. Are we going to walk into these? Where Japan's been walking for a long time already, and now this. It's, to me, it's just the Japanese didn't take over Queensland like they were. Everyone was saying in the 90s. So, but maybe we're just going to take up the persona of the Japanese lifestyle and go ahead and head first into their culture, and this being one of them, our sleeping habits.
Exactly right. Yeah, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? And I wonder what the quality of sleep will be in those, and wonder how soundproof they are. I mean, there's a whole bunch of questions, right? And I am also somewhat claustrophobic. You wouldn't get me in one of those. I have enough trouble on a seat in an aeroplane going, from one side of the world to the other. I find that horribly claustrophobic at the best of times. So you wouldn't get me in one of those.
Exactly, let alone sleeping there. But each to their own. I say good luck to them. But look, and it all is found a niche. But I can't see it. I can't see it expanding in a big way, because there's a lot more apartments. There are a lot more vacant apartments than a lot of people would like to think, and even the local governments would like to think. And there's more, greater benefits in looking for those, especially if you've got a good rental history. But look, it's a good story, isn't it? At the end of the day,
certainly, it's an amazing story. And here's another one, right? What about this here property then? So this is is it legal?
Well, I've been following this up. This was again, I was tagged on a tweet and on Twitter, and I found it fascinating. I've done a little bit of research on this complex. I've spoken to the local Adelaide Council, and it's rather interesting. On face value, the what do you call it? Ray White Group have responded and said that that they've had South Australia Housing Authority inspected, and they say it's okay. But look, perhaps as a bed sit, it may be okay. And a bed sit is vastly different from a granny flat or a long stay accommodation. So in this case, you've got a number of issues with when you're taking up a long-term lease. And as I've been talking to Adelaide Council about it, and that is one of them is I wanted to know, and Adelaide Council, I'm waiting for them to get back to me, is if the adjoining walls are fireproof. And this is the problem that we have here in New South Wales with a lot of these makeshift granny flats and these illegal boarding homes, is when you've got adjoining walls to dwellings, that are not fireproof. And if a fire starts in one of these, it's just going to spread, and and catastrophe will strike. So these are the things. Although it may be suitable for a bed set, but the original ad the ads are being removed from domain, by the way, but the original ad was for a long-term lease. It wasn't a bed set. It wasn't as a short-term rental or anything like that. So, some of the followers and some of the people that follow me on Twitter were also asking different questions with whether or not with the legality of it. But I just think it's on face value. It's you've got the toilet with frosted glass section right opposite the kitchen sink. So
conveniently located, I think isn't that the right word that they use? Conveniently located,
something like that. Conveniently located. You can get up for all sorts of reasons in the middle of the night. You can make yourself a sandwich and then visit the loo before you go back to bed, and it's all in the same room.
Yeah, I know, just great. I mean, I have to say, I get quite annoyed with this sort of stuff because we're being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed into smaller and smaller and smaller spaces, right? I have to say that I find this really uncomfortable as a concept.
Look, again, it looks clean, looks good, right? But and apart from the safety issues, when you look at it, you sort of think, oh shit, that looks okay. But what was alarming, what caught my attention as well was, they were asking $400 a week. And another unit in this building, they split it into 4 units. Unit number 1 rented for $500 a week, so a bit bigger than this one. But rented for $500 a week. My God, we're talking Adelaide. We're not talking the CBD of Sydney or Melbourne for that matter. We're talking Adelaide for $400 and $500 a week.
Well, I'll tell you, Edwin, that then brings this one back into contrast. $900 a month for that pod in the centre of Melbourne, right? Maybe it is a bargain after all.
Exactly, except that looks like you're going to be walking into a washing machine, maybe. Maybe it is. Maybe it is.
Maybe that's part of the feature, added value.
Yeah, maybe you get a blow dry.
Very good. Now, not another very important article, and this is one that I've been on about for some time: the Sydney housing stress problem, right, which is getting worse and worse.
Yeah, look, and this is I chose this article because I wanted to talk to you, to expand more on your data, which goes into more intricate detail as to what's happening. But the points that this article, the Sydney Morning Herald raises, obviously apart from the Sydney housing stress hotspots, again, it goes back to what we were talking earlier on with regards to your demographics and the reasons why people are bought in certain areas. And you look at the ethnicity of the larger population in these areas, and it begins to all the dots start to join up, and you can see why there's a lot of mortgage stress. That's one of the things. The other thing that we also look at, and we looked at these areas, is some of these areas are predominantly made up of first home buyers. Although they're also first home buyers, I would say in these areas that this article identifies, first home buyers that would have walked into the older homes, because in these areas that they've observed that the mortgage stress being up, above the 30%, being up, almost as high as 38%. When you look at when you're driving through these areas, you see your McMansions, and then you see a couple of blocks further down, you start to see your old fibros, which were really your older homes that were built in the early 50s, which were your return servicemen's cottages, or housing commission developments of the 60s and 70s. and so they haven't had that transformation. So the first home buyers, because they want to stay within the community, they buy these and then they get themselves into a bigger mess. Because and have been over the last 2 years because of the construction costs going up, and more to the point over the last 12 months. So this is another reason, and this is another observation that we've had. But I think your picture or your scenarios that you put out from time to time with regards to the areas paint a better picture, more so of the first home buyers in general that are more spread out over the southwest and in the west and parts of the northwest regions.
Well, there's a couple of observations about the article. They keep reverting to this 30% of income. If you're overpaying more than 30% of your income on the mortgage, they define you as stress, right? That's a really, really bad definition. It's been bad for a long time. It goes back to a couple of decades ago. The 30% was what the banks used when they actually would lend up to 30%, but they wouldn't lend over 30% of income going on the mortgage, right? Now, if you think about that today, most people would be well over that. In fact, quite a few people are in Sydney and Melbourne are at 40 to 45 or even 50% of income going on the mortgage. So I don't think that's a very good measure of stress. I don't use it personally. I use a cash flow measure. I look at money coming in, money going out. And my argument is, if people are having difficulty meeting all their obligations and paying their mortgage, and they're at the end of the month in negative territory in terms of money in, money out, they got a problem. Because you can look after it for a little while, and you can borrow on a credit card or go and use buy now, pay later to try and manage it. But if you fundamentally every month get to the point where effectively you are more and more and more underwater, eventually something has to give. And of course, people prioritize paying the mortgage relative to many other expenses that they might come across. So my modeling and my whole approach is looking at it on a cash flow basis. And if I look at it on a cash flow basis, and if I look at first-time buyers, a lot of first-time buyers are in a huge problem now because they bought at the top of the market. They often bought with government incentives, with very low deposits, thanks to these government incentive schemes. They quite often used, home builder to buy off the plat. Now, there's a bunch of different stimulus measures that were thrown at them. So a lot of people have now got in at the high point in the cycle. Their incomes are under huge pressure. The cost of living are going through the roof, and now interest rates are going up. So the net for these first-time buyers, they've got very little equity. They're right at the top of the market. They've got nowhere to go. And that's why we're seeing in some of those suburbs, and I can list them as I do every month, those suburbs with high counts of mortgage stress or indeed rental stress, because actually there's a similar thing going on with the rental sector as well. But interestingly, it's not just those that have issues, right? So if you look more carefully, then you look at other areas, for example, up in the Central Coast, where a lot of people moved up from Sydney to move out, got a bigger mortgage again, but they're having to deal with that. Or if you look in places like Mossman in New South Wales, right, or even Toorak down in Melbourne, there you've got very affluent people with lots of complex financial relationships, quite often multiple investment properties, all those things, but they're still struggling as well. So you start seeing then these mortgage stress holes, if you like, appearing in lots of different places. And in fact, I did a thing today for Channel 9. I think it's going to come out tomorrow, where we went into this in some detail. So keep an eye out for that. But there's a lot of interest now in trying to get granular and understand how different households and different groups are actually behaving, because you can't just cluster everybody together, right? And overall, I feel that there's around 30% of households who are doing really well. They've got plenty of buffers and everything is fine. You've then got another 30% that are sort of, middle of the road. They're just about over, just about under. And then you've got 30% who are really, really struggling, right? And they've been struggling for some time. But now what we're finding is more and more people are drifting into that bottom 30%. And the difficulty is with what's happening at the moment, with the inflation continuing to rage and cost of living going up, and now mortgages because of the rates going up, they're just getting to the point where they can't make these things work anymore. Now, this doesn't go bang on one day. This takes a couple of years to work through, because people will try and keep their home. They'll try and keep on making the mortgage repayments, but in so doing, they get themselves into deeper and deeper difficulty, getting themselves into more debt. So you see more buy now, pay later, more credit card debt, more other types of loans. So you see this loan equation bubbling up. And then what you see quite often is an attempt by the bank to solve it by refinancing. So maybe they're at 22, 23, 24 years in their repayments, and then they put out to 30 years, right? And then they get another loan, get a bit of capital pulled out from the equity, and then try and but unless you change your behavior, you don't solve the problem, right? And it goes on again. So this is a very deep rooted and structural issue that we've got, and I'm afraid that a lot of the mainstream coverage is just so piss poor, frankly. But this is a real important issue.
It's underplayed or not discussed as much is the maintenance of a lot of these properties in a lot of these areas. Well, you only have to drive through these areas and you can see the vast difference in as I said in your buildings, and I know the issues. I mean, we're talking about homes that were in a lot of these areas. We're talking about homes that, as I said, that were built in the 40s and 50s. That were return service and cottages, and things haven't been getting cheaper over the last decade to do renovations, let alone now. So all this is putting, as you say, a lot of pressure on families and on individuals, and it's that, in my view, it's that pressure and that makes people more, gives people more of a reason to want to sell, because it's of the family nucleus, the breakdown and the relationship breakdowns whilst they're going through this, in a way, although it's a byproduct of a financial stress, but it just exacerbates, it just gets bigger and bigger, and then you end up with all sorts of other issues. Hence the reason why we're seeing what we're seeing over in China, and people are facing those random stabbings in office buildings, and and all the anger that people have got, and walking around with all sorts of problems. Which, by the way, I believe that we're going to be walking into that in the near future as well. May not be as bad, but we're going to see a lot of angry individuals, and that's the follow up to this tweet where I got this earlier today, and that was what caught my attention was in this particular tweet where they report that 58% of Americans are now living paycheck to paycheck. And then I asked you the question on the tweet, what would be the percentage, the equivalent percentages here in Australia, which also plays a bigger part in as to whether people are going to be, where they're going to be moving to, whether or not they're going to be pressured to sell or going to be forced to sell, more so because of family split ups than the banks pressuring them to sell, and also whether or not they're going to be able to buy.
Yeah, well, this is a very interesting US data point, right? 58% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. That's Americans not just who own a mortgage and therefore a property, but they actually could be renting in other situations. So I went back and looked at my data and looked at the whole population base. And it's interesting that the ABS 3 years ago had a statistic that around 22% of households in Australia were pretty much line ball paycheck to paycheck, right? That was before the COVID situation. On my base sort of case analysis now, I think it's close to 43%. It's definitely gone up, and that's partly an inflation question, and I think it's also partly a question of no income growth, and the cost of accommodation and all those other things are much higher. So I reckon it's about 43% now, which is a huge number. Again, it's not equally spread across the whole country. There are suburbs where everyone's fine. There are other suburbs where a lot of people are in difficulty. And my concern is, Edwin, that some of those areas where you see a lot of this financial pressure, it really does turn into social consequences, as you said, and that includes things like, violence and crime and those sorts of things, as well as the point that I just want to emphasize again what you said. There are costs to owning a property over and above paying the mortgage, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You got to maintain it. You got to insure it. You got to pay the rates. And what surprises me, and again, I said in my service, most people, when they budget for what can I afford to borrow, don't take account of these other costs they've also got to deal with. right? So they go into this pipe dream of owning a property because the bank says they can have this size mortgage, but they never think through the consequences of the other things that they're signing up to implicitly, right? And if you don't have a sinking fund, in other words, if you don't put aside money each year for the maintenance of the property over time, you're going to come unglued at some point, aren't you?
Oh, definitely. And it's just in the cost and the maintenance. And as I said, as I've been saying for a very, very long time, when you're buying even somebody else's makeshift renovation, you just don't know how how badly affected the property was before the makeshift renovation or the patch-up work that they've done in order to cover it up for us. And the whole real estate industry, not the whole, but most of the real estate industry has been started being on the gravy train. They've been riding the gravy train because they've gotten away with so much. I think a lot of it is criminal. The way that we approach buying and selling property is very much underhanded, and it's as much as it's very adversarial. And I say that for a reason, because the selling agents are not. They're not in your corner. They will make out to be, and this is the fundamental reasons why. People have got to be so careful. And you and I've been saying this for many years. But look, these costs are only going to be escalating, and now the other costs that we can see that are going to be rising and at a phenomenal rate are insurance costs. In some of these low-lying areas now, I'm hearing people talking about the insurance policies, or if they want to renew, they're going from whether it be $2,500 per annum. Now the insurers are asking anywhere between $20,000 and $30,000 per annum.
Yep. No, absolutely, yeah. And some people, again, had a chance to interact with a few of them, just saying, "Well, we've got no choice. We can't now afford to get insurance. So next time there's a flood, we're going to be wiped out." I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah, so it's a crazy world, and as I said, from the beginning of the chat and the rant, it almost is like we're in a glitch, because we're just walking around shaking our heads, but as to what's happening. And of course, then you hear on the other side of the coin, you hear the mainstream media pumping the sales and this property got over the reserve. I mean, we're going to hear that regardless. But don't be fooled, because you just more of a reason now to be more diligent with what and how you approach, whether it be a property to purchase, and also whether it be a property to rent. Now, just because you've gone into a rental scenario like this one that we presented over in Adelaide, from what the council tells me, they were office suites. They're not long-term rentals. And if the owner is put on notice and given a demolition order to revert back to its its purpose, well, then guess what? The tenants have got to look for other accommodation, and we're going to see more of that in and around Sydney as well, with a lot of properties that have got this makeshift granny flats and the like. But then, sometimes it's you have to shake your head. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Well, my perspective, particularly where we are now, is that one, households absolutely have to put their own budget together so that they know what they can afford. Look at the money in, look at the money out. That's true whether you're owning a property now, whether you're thinking about buying a property or whatever. You can't rely on some third party. You've got to do that yourself. You've got to understand what your current financial position is, right? And then what you've got to do is to overlay the changes that would happen to your budget if you bought, right? So that includes all those costs we've been talking about. So the maintenance costs, the insurance costs, all of those sorts of things. And the other point I'd make, Edwin, and I keep saying this because it's just so critical, just because the bank says, sure, you can borrow $800,000 or $1 million or whatever it is, right? That doesn't mean that they are doing any work on your behalf to make sure that you can actually afford it. All they're doing is worrying about the loan, is it safe from their risk perspective? And that's completely different. So, quite often when you do your own maths, what you'll discover is that you can't possibly afford what the bank theoretically can offer you. And yet, so often I see in my conversations people who start from the assumption, I'm going to borrow as much as I can borrow from the bank. So I'll shop around the banks and I'll get the very best, biggest mortgage I can because the bank says I can afford it. And they go from there. To me, that's completely the wrong way to go about it, right? Because what you do is you then end up with a false expectation of what you can afford. You then buy a property that's probably more expensive than is realistic. And then when things go pear-shaped, you immediately get under pressure, whether it's mortgage stress or whatever, right? There are things that you can do as a prospective purchaser to make sure that you don't go down those rabbit holes. And then, of course, do the due diligence on the property as well, because as we keep saying, a lot of people don't do that either. So you need to do a financial due diligence and you need to do a property due diligence to be able to understand how things go. If you do that, then the chances are that you're going to be in a much better position relative to everybody else. But all we can go on doing at Edwin is keep saying these points again and again and again, try and drill them home, because unfortunately the mainstream media just doesn't cover this stuff.
No, they don't. They don't, and they won't, and it's not in their best interest because it doesn't sell ad space on their platforms or on their publications. It's we could keep on talking about that, but it's just one of those things, Martin.
No, exactly, different agenda, right?
Yeah, we're in a glitch,
yeah.
But hopefully. Look, I'm hoping sooner than later we'll get out of this, but who knows? But look, and I'll leave it with this on that point and on our conspiracies, and it's I can see it sooner than later, Martin. That we're going to be start throwing out the bait out to those high net worth individuals or people with with lots of cash in the suitcases to come over, because how else do you cushion the property falls? Now, we've got your 50-year loans. I'm still 50-50 on future lockdowns to keep the listings down, but I'm 95% sure that it's going to be sooner than later that the government's actually going to make some great incentives and throw everything at people coming in order to take up the properties.
Yeah. Well, of course, as I said earlier on, they've removed the final barrier of people coming in. They're not going to ask now about vaccine status, so that's another tick on the list of things that they could do. Now, just before we go, you had a really interesting observation and tip of the week, right? Actually, rain is good for buying property. How come?
I love it. Look, the old saying goes, you check under the bonnet when you're buying a car, if you know what you're looking for. And you do the same when you're buying a house. You check out, you check under the floor or in the subfloor area. And rain exposes a lot, not only in the subfloor area, but it also exposes a lot that's going on with the around the outer skin of the property, if there are any issues, and in the roof space. And these are predominantly the main areas that can be troublesome to deal with and can be very, very costly to rectify. So I love the rain. I don't like working in the rain, especially in winter, but I think the rain and the water really does expose a lot of the issues that owners would otherwise like to hide in dry climates.
Absolutely, and things like gutters that are working or not working, and downpipes that are blocked or not blocked, all those sorts of things. And as you say, if you have a really good rainstorm, then you can see what the windows are really made of and whether the water comes in or not, right? And so it is quite a good opportunity. And of course, if you've got the old high-rise and you're looking in the basement in the car park, just see how many tiers of the car park are flooded. That tells you something as well, doesn't it?
Oh, it does, and it is interesting. Look, you see all sorts of things in the rain. You see a lot more. You see a lot more in the rain. but it's look, yeah, it's just simple as that. Always remember to look under the look for the, especially if it's on piers, the homes are on piers. The majority are. I mean, then you've got homes on slabs, but then again, the rain will also expose the internal structure of the framework. Because depending on what how the water's running and so forth, look, it's a good opportunity. It's obviously not bad, not good for vendors or sellers, but I think it's a good opportunity for you as a buyer to because it exposes a lot more.
Yeah, terrific, Edwin. Well, thanks very much for your time tonight, as always, and some really good points made. Well done, and we'll do it all again next week, huh?
Definitely, and if it might be, we might have to do it on a boat if the Warragamba Dam busts. That's another one.
You've not heard of Project Arc, right? So the first thing is get the timbers. Well, that's the problem.
Well, I'm starting to amass the animals, so that I don't have two of each. I've only got one rooster left. I've got two cats, but they're both female.
Yeah. Well, we have to rewrite the script slightly if that's to work. Anyway, Edwin, thanks very much. Keep dry, keep safe, and we'll talk again next week. See you then. Bye.